What exactly is the technology of blockchain? It is destined to become the next great thing. If a blockchain-based startups wants you to invest in their business, are you passing up a chance of a lifetime or are you passing up an opportunity that won't come around again? The answer to these questions and others will be provided in today's episode, so make sure you don't leave just yet. Welcome to Crypto Coach, where we take difficult concepts related to cryptocurrencies, dissect them, and explain them in language that is easy to understand. Before we get started, I want you to remind to make sure you have subscribed to the channel and click the bell so that you will be notified as soon as new video is uploaded. Blockchain and the fascinating world of blockchain technology will be today's main topics of discussion. It's my hope that by the time you reach the conclusion of this video, you will have a clear understanding of what blockchain technology is and why it is so difficult to distinguish it from Bitcoin. Before we can handle on how the blockchain technology operates, we need to get a grasp on the issues that it was created to address. With that in mind, let's take a step back and allow me to ask you a question. In this day and age, how can we determine whether something is genuine or not? Take for instance, a buck bill, a driver's license, or a vote cast in an election. What criteria do we use to evaluate the reliability of this information? The response is, there is a record of it that we retain. For instance, the bank will keep a record of the serial number that is printed on each individual dollar bill, because the DMV keeps a record of your driver's license number and uses voting records to keep tabs on who voted and who didn't. It is impossible for the same person to cast more than one vote in an election. You need only check the document in question with an appropriate authority in order to determine whether or not it is a genuine piece of paper. We even something called notaries, who are individuals who have been granted the permission by the government to act as witnesses, swear to the veracity of facts or identities, and record their testimony. You'll notice that there is one thing that all of these mechanisms have in common, and that is the fact that they are all centralized. What this means is that there is a central authority, which may be a bank, a state entity, or a person who has authority to issue and authenticate information. These central authority hold a great deal of power, and as you are well aware, power may occasionally lead to corruption. What then takes place in the event that one of these authorities decides to alter the facts, or perhaps even alter history in some little way? This may sound ridiculously far-fetched, yet even our world history is nothing more than a record kept by historians in a centralized fashion. In accordance with proverb, history is written by the winners. It is possible for those in authority to twist the truth in certain situations. If you don't believe something like that is conceivable, have a look at this example from real life. The majority of money in circulation today is little more than a record of who owes what to whom. The supreme mortgage crisis of 2008 resulted in around 1,000 businesses in the United States receiving a total of over $630 billion that had never been available to them before. Other businesses were entirely released from their financial obligations. You can't refute the fact that someone made the decision to falsify the records of how much money was held in owing, despite the fact that some people could claim that this bailout was appropriate. Because of this, Bitcoin come to existence. It was the first type of money that did not require the existence of an overarching governing body. Everyone, not only central banks, is responsible for keeping its records. And when everyone is keeping track of what's going on and confirming the facts, well, that implies that you can no longer change the ledger of transactions whenever something doesn't add up or because it would be more convenient to do so. You really do need to start taking responsibilities for your actions. However, decentralization might be beneficial in other areas beside the financial sector as well. When it comes to doing research, we used to rely on those huge encyclopedia books. Don't you remember those? In order to produce what we at Encyclopedia Britannica thought to be authoritative work of knowledge, we utilized the services of 100 full-time editors and more than 4,000 writers. Imagine for a moment that the authority that the editors of these books possess when it came to deciding what should be mentioned, condemned, condoned, or ignored. To answer your question, the final volume of the Encyclopedia Britannica was released in the year 2010. Today, material is kept up to date by a far wider variety of people thanks to the over 130,000 active editors that contribute to Wikipedia. Because every edit is visible to the public and can be checked by any user, the likelihood of one of them going rogue without being discovered is significantly reduced. Decentralization lowers the likelihood of undesirable outcomes such as corruption, fraud, and manipulation. The use of blockchain technology is a novel and forward-thinking approach to achieving decentralization. In a word, the application of blockchain technology is the answer to the issue of excessive centralization. A decentralized method of keeping a ledger that is nearly hard to forge. The system allows for everyone to keep records without the need for central authority to oversee the process. When there are so many sets of eyes observing and checking everything that is being done, it is extremely difficult to breach the rules without drawing attention to yourself. It is possible that you're curious about the origin of the term blockchain. Imagine for a moment that we are keeping a communal ledger that has numerous pages of records. At the beginning of each page is a brief synopsis of the page that came before it. If you alter one of the sections on the page before this one, you will also need to revise the summary that is located on this page. Therefore, the pages are connected to one another in the form of links or chains. Blocks are what pages are referred to as in the technology world. A chain of blocks, often known as blockchain, is created when the data from one block is linked to the data from the block that came before it. There is a widespread misconception that the identified person who created Bitcoin was also the one who developed blockchain technology. Technically speaking, he only invented the first application of it in real life, and the application was Bitcoin. The term blockchain does not appear once in Satoshi's first white paper. In point of fact, it is not even defined. The phrase chain of blocks is the one that gets the closest to describing blockchain. Since you are now familiar with the concept of blockchain technology, we need to find answers to the following two important questions. First, how does the technology truly function? And second, will blockchain fundamentally alter the way we live in the future? Let's begin with the initial inquiry, shall we? This question can also be phrased as, how can I construct a system that allows the creation, verification, and update of records by anybody? In other words, in order for a blockchain to properly function as its own entity, there are four components that must be present. A peer-to-peer network is the first element that must be in place in order to enable a blockchain. A network of computers, which are collectively referred to as nodes, all of which have the same level of privilege. Anyone and everyone can participate in it. The internet essentially provides the same functionality as stated here. Thus, we already have it. We require this network in order to able to communicate and collaborate with one another, even we are physically separated. The use of cryptography is the second component. A secure method of communication is unsafe environment is what cryptography aims to achieve. Even when there are dangerous players present, I am able to validate communication and demonstrate the validity of my own message thanks to this feature. Because of the first element, we have a requirement for cryptography. Keep in mind that I stated that anyone, including dishonest people, can engage in our network. It is wonderful that I am able to communicate, but I also have responsibility to ensure that my communication is received in its original form. A consensus algorithm constitutes the third component. You can use the word rule for the technical term algorithm in this sentence. You can use the word rule for this technical term algorithm in this sentence. This indicates that we need to come to an agreement regarding the rules that govern how we are to add a new page, which is also referred to as book, to our records. There are many other kinds of consensus rules, but in the case of Bitcoin, we employ a technique for reaching consensus called as proof of work. According to this algorithm, in order to earn the privilege of adding new page to our ledger, a person must first discover a solution to a mathematical issue that can only be solved through the use of computational power. In order to answer the mathematical problem, computers across the network need to perform calculations, which requires a significant amount of power. In other words, they put significant amount of effort. Because of this, when one of them gets the number that solves the problem and exposes it to the network, they are essentially exhibiting a proof of work. This is because the network is keeping a track of the network that has been done. You may think of it as a nod's way of saying, hey, I put a lot of effort into addressing this problem first, so I deserve to create the next page. This particular type of algorithm is the one that is used by the Bitcoin blockchain. These are alternative consensus algorithms that don't require as much energy as this one does, but I've already explained those. There are pros and cons to different algorithms, but in order to run a decentralized ledger future, you'll need to choose one. Otherwise, it will be really hard to reach a consensus with so many people in the network. Finally, our last element is punishment and reward. This element is actually derived from game theory, and it makes sure that it will be in people's best interest to always follow the rules. So far, we've set up a network that has a way to communicate securely and follows a set of rules for reaching consensus. Now, we'll glue these elements together by giving a reward to people that help us maintain our records and add new pages. This reward is a token or coin that is rewarded each time a consensus has been reached and a new block is added to our chain. On the other hand, bad actors who try to trick or manipulate the system will end up losing the money they spend on computational power, or their coins can be taken away from them. In the end, the important thing to remember is that the punishment and reward system works on psychological behavior. It turns the rules of the system from something you need to follow into something you'll want to follow, since it will be in your best interest to do so. This was just a very high explanation of what blockchain consists of. So there you have it: 4 elements for creating blockchain technology: a peer-to-peer network, cryptography, a consensus algorithm, and punishment and reward. However, there is a 5th element that can really be synthesized: market adoption. I mean, we can have a group of 5 people sharing a ledger with consensus algorithm, but doesn't really make it decentralized, since not enough people are part of the system. Moreover, if there's no adoption, there's not really any value to our coin. And the 4th element of punishment and reward is very effective. Only once you achieve critical mass in the number of users does blockchain become truly decentralized and therefore immutable. At that point, the coin of that blockchain usually begins to appreciate in value. It's hard to say what triggered mass-scale market adoption. In Bitcoin's case, things actually started through use on the dark web, where people used Bitcoin to pay for drugs and other illegal stuff. But since then, more people have begun to research Bitcoin and blockchain and have seen the benefits they offer, either in practice or as an investment. So there you have it, the 5 elements of a truly open, public, decentralized blockchain. Up until today, there are only a handful of blockchain that have over 1,000 truly independent participants, and such can be considered as decentralized Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Boreno, to name a few. If you're thinking that it sounds like a lot of hard work to put blockchain in motion, you're absolutely right, but this is where Ethereum comes in. Ethereum is do-it-yourself blockchain where all of these 5 elements are already in motion. All you need to do is build the right solution on top of it, but that's a whole different whiteboard episode you can check out later on. Now let's move on to another term you may have heard: a private or closed blockchain. This term refers to companies that screen and limit the players who can participate in their blockchain. It's a little bit like how the internet, which is open to everybody and anybody, is different from an intranet. An internal network of company computers. While I assume some companies will find value in running private blockchains to improve their internal processes, it's far from anything exciting in as much as it has nothing to do with decentralization. To emphasize this a bit more, let's compare open public blockchains to closed private ones. A public blockchain is open to everybody. It's transitional and borderless. It's censorship resistant, and it doesn't require any third party. It's also neutral. There is no such thing as good, bad, illegal, or legal transaction. There is only valid or invalid one. A private blockchain, on the other hand, is limited to authorized participants only, and it's governed by a handful of entities. In other words of Andreas Antonopoulos, in most cases of private blockchains, you don't really need a blockchain. You can just share a spreadsheet between the participants. The whole idea of blockchain was decentralized process through a general public, and that's exactly the opposite of what a private blockchain does. The features of public blockchain, on the other hand, create enormous benefits. There's no single point of failure. The records are immutable, also known as tamper-proof. Finally, it's censorship resistance, so you can't really remove a record or stop it from getting published as long as it follows the consensus rules. Before we end today's lesson, we still have one major question to answer. Is blockchain technology the big thing? I assume you may heard of different startups that are using blockchain technology to solve some sort of a problem. In most cases, when I hear such a company, I ask two questions. First, are they using a public-private blockchain? Since they are not using a public blockchain, there are not really anything very disrupted here. Second, do they even need a blockchain? If you remember in the beginning of this lesson, we talked about the dangers of centralization, but these dangers are only meaningful if there's a lot at stake. For example, the queue to the pharmacy is managed in a centralized manner, but I don't really care since there's not a lot at stake and it's actually more efficient that way. Blockchain technology is very good at decentralizing, but it's also very inefficient, slow, and energy consuming. For example, Bitcoin's network takes 10 minutes on average to confirm transaction, not the ideal waiting time for buying a cup of coffee at 7-Eleven. The only reason to choose blockchain technology as your solution is if your problem is actually centralization. If you don't need to decentralize something, you probably don't need to use blockchain technology and are better off with some centralized solution. In fact, it will probably work better. To sum it up, blockchain technology is truly disruptive, but at the moment, only a handful of use cases really require it. So the real question is this: at the current moment, is our world ready for more complex blockchain implementation than what Bitcoin already offers? In the early 2000s, there were a lot of Amazons, Googles, and Facebook that never caught on for the changes they presented. Today, many of these blockchains startups face the same fate. That's it for today's episode of Crypto Coach. Hopefully by now you understand what blockchain technology is, an open, censorship-resistant method for managing records by everybody, hence making them practically possible to falsify. It's a solution to the problem centralization presents. I also hope that whenever you hear the term blockchain technology in the future, you'll know to take it with a grain of salt and ask the right questions. You may still have some questions. If so, just leave them in the comment section below. If you're watching this video on YouTube and enjoy what you've seen, don't forget to hit the like button. Then make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you'll be notified as soon as we post the new episodes. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you in a bit.